Imagine being Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton, burying the throttle down a massive straight, only to be forced onto the brakes, not for a corner, but because the FIA's disastrous 2026 regulations mathematically force cars to harvest power at top speed. It's an engineering nightmare known as super clipping. Today we expose how the FIA ruined the racing product and the desperate boardroom scramble to fix it. To understand how the pinnacle of motorsport actually went backwards, you have to look at the paranoia inside the FIA. When drafting the 2026 engine regulations, the governing body made a catastrophic decision. They wanted to simplify the engines, so they completely ripped out the MGU-H. This was the incredibly complex, expensive motor generator unit that used to sit on the turbocharger and harvest free energy from the engine's exhaust gases. Why kill it? Because it was a political concession to lure in new manufacturers like Audi and Ford, who felt the MGU-H was too complex to develop from scratch. But with that system gone, they had to make up the lost power somewhere. Their solution? A radical near 50-50 power split between the traditional combustion engine and the electrical battery. Suddenly, the cars are forced to lug around a massive battery that feeds an electric motor capable of deploying nearly 470 horsepower. But here is where the paranoia kicked in. The logical engineering solution to harvest that much electrical energy would be to put regenerative braking on the front wheels. But early proposals to introduce front axle regenerative braking were entirely scrapped. Why? Because the FIA was terrified that engineering geniuses at Red Bull or Mercedes would secretly manipulate a front axle system into highly illegal traction control or all-wheel drive. So, out of sheer fear, the FIA forced 100% of the energy recovery burden entirely onto the rear wheels. And that single paranoid decision is exactly what broke the 2026 car, because the rear brakes alone simply cannot harvest enough kinetic energy to feed that massive battery under normal braking conditions. The energy recovery must happen while the car is physically accelerating down the straights. The result is the ugliest buzzword of the 2026 season, super clipping. In simple terms, super clipping is the act of running the MGU-K in generator mode to act as an energy harvester, while the internal combustion engine is running flat out. This means drivers are intentionally spiking the engine RPM and mathematically dragging the car to force the system to harvest. We literally hear the car lose pace, often downshifting at top speed, as the super clipping violently kicks in and drops the revs. The tragic part is that the FIA was warned. Years ago, Max Verstappen and Red Bull simulated these exact regulations. Max explicitly warned of a worst-case scenario where the 2026 cars would be downshifting hundreds of meters before the end of a straight just to charge the battery. The FIA ignored him, and now the drivers are living that nightmare. This brutal energy equation turned Saturday qualifying into a miserable exercise in energy arithmetic rather than raw speed. The single-lap spectacle has been ruined, but the disaster bleeds into the race itself. Formula One has historically been about pushing a chassis to its absolute aerodynamic limit, finding the ragged edge of physical grip. Look at a high-speed benchmark like Turn 9 at Melbourne. Under the previous regulations, this sweeping corner was a test of bravery. In 2026, the drivers are purposely not taking high-speed corners like this at their full limit, but they cannot afford to use it. Drivers are lifting off the throttle noticeably early, executing massive, momentum-killing coasts hundreds of meters before a corner's apex. Effectively, underdriving the car is rewarded, because if they underdrive the corner, they harvest the electrical energy needed to survive the straights. McLaren team principal Andrea Stella hit the nail on the head. He stated that the current rules are actively punishing drivers for trying to exploit mechanical and aerodynamic grip. It goes entirely against the DNA of driving a Formula One car, but it gets worse. Because if a driver does decide to burn their energy to make a pass, they are immediately punished for it. Welcome to the era of the yo-yo effect, a term coined by George Russell. In the past, overtaking required raw aggression, late braking, and brilliant defensive car placement. Not anymore. We are now witnessing an artificially manufactured racing spectacle, where the energy regime is the absolute king. We saw this dynamic clearly during the opening laps of the Australian GP, where Charles Leclerc and George Russell swapped positions multiple times. On the broadcast, it looked like an amazing classic dogfight. But none of those overtakes were done in the heavy braking zones. It simply came down to who had the best battery availability. If you drain your battery to pass, you get overtaken on the following straight. It is literally impossible to defend against a car with an extra 400 horsepower stored up. And that assumes the software actually works. Just ask Oscar Piastri. During a warm-up lap in Australia, Piastri experienced a sudden, unexpected extra 100 kilowatts of power exiting turn 4. It was like he hit a Mario Kart mushroom boost at the absolute worst possible time because the car's software got confused about his deployment strategy. When the computers are doing the overtaking, the sport becomes a dangerous, unpredictable video game. Instead of DRS trains, we're about to watch boring, stagnant state of charge trains. But the FIA's miscalculation isn't just ruining the on-track product, it is physically destroying the cars. When you force a completely new, incredibly heavy electrical system to harvest and deploy energy in such an unnatural, violent cycle, things are going to break. And they are breaking everywhere. During the chaotic rollout, Fernando Alonso had to retire his car due to sudden alarms, and the vibrations on the Aston Martin were reportedly too much for the drivers to even handle. McLaren didn't even manage to take to the starting grid in China due to failures. Audi has been seen running just one car each weekend, and Williams has entirely missed practice sessions. These are not standard teething issues. These are massive electrical failures caused by a fundamental flaw in the rulebook, and right now, the FIA has absolutely no public solution for it. Fortunately, the FIA is not completely blind to this brewing disaster. Behind closed doors, there is an absolute scramble to find a band-aid solution before millions of dollars in research and development completely go up in smoke. The governing body has accepted that their energy harvesting rules were pitched at the wrong level. But fixing it isn't simple. The immediate proposal is to unchain the MGU-K. Right now, it is artificially limited by regulations to charge at 250 kilowatts during superclipping, and the FIA is looking at unlocking its full 350 kilowatt capacity. Theoretically, this allows the battery to charge faster, meaning the extreme momentum-killing coasting can happen much later on the straights. Another solution, suggested by Juan Pablo Montoya, is to artificially decrease the amount of power that can be deployed from the battery. This would reduce total horsepower, but it would stop the battery from draining so fast, reducing the need for extreme momentum-killing tactics and bringing back late braking. Even Toto Wolff, a man who historically defends engine regulations, admitted that minor tweaks should be made to make fans want to watch. But the most desperate option on the table is boosting the V6 engine by increasing the permitted fuel flow. If they do this, they might save the racing product. But doing so would instantly destroy the FIA's entire net zero by 2030 marketing campaign. They are trapped in a multi-million-dollar nightmare of their own making. The drivers are furious, the fans are confused, and the governing body is running out of time to fix a fundamentally broken machine. The frustration is boiling over so violently that reigning world champion Max Verstappen has openly stated he might just walk away from Formula 1 entirely and move to GT3 racing. So ask yourself, if the 2026 regulations are so catastrophic that they are actively driving the best talent away from the pinnacle of motorsport, what exactly are we going to be watching on Sundays? Let me know in the comments if you think the FIA should scrap the electrical rules entirely, drop a like if this telemetry shocked you, and make sure to subscribe to the F1 channel so you don't miss our next paddock deep dive.